To start off our presentation, we are going to share with you a little story about a man by the name of Steve who went on a safari in South Africa. Unfortunately, what Steve thought was going to be the vacation of a lifetime turned out to be his worst nightmare. Before Steve and the other crew members left for the day, the tour guide told them that no matter what, no one was allowed to venture off in the trails by themselves. The tour guide warned them that if they did, they could get lost and would have a greater chance of being attacked by a wild animal. However, even with this warning, Steve, thinking he knew what he was doing, wandered away from the rest of the group to take a picture of a cute lion cub he saw playing off in the distance. After Steve got his pictures, he turned around to head back to the trail, but no one was in sight. Not only could he not find the rest of the group, but he could also not remember how to get back to the trail. He panicked. He looked around in all directions, picked the way he thought was right, and began running back in that direction. Steve ran as fast as he could, but had no luck finding the trail. Tired from running, he stopped to catch his breath, but as soon as he stopped running, he saw the big and furious mom of the baby cub slowly creeping out from underneath a rock, roaring and showing her teeth. Steve was attacked. As a result of the attack, Steve ended up having to get both of his legs amputated. When he woke up from surgery, he questioned life, God, and why it happened. Laying in the hospital bed, he asked himself, "Why me?"
Many people, including Christians, have a hard time understanding why it is that people suffer. In Christian theology, it is taught that God is all-powerful, all-good, and all-loving. Because of these things, people often wonder, if there is a God, and that God loves everyone, then why do people in this world suffer? One explanation is sin. Since sin is a violation of a loving relationship with God and others, it makes sense that sinning would cause one to suffer. However, the question then becomes, why would the all-loving, all-knowing, and all-powerful God let people sin and cause this suffering? This is frequently referred to as the problem of evil. The answer is not because God is mad at us or because he wants to punish us, but is because we as humans have free will, and thus we have the ability and responsibility not to sin. Because we live in a broken world and have the ability to make poor choices, suffering happens all too frequently. Without this choice of free will, humans wouldn't have the ability to choose what they would like, causing humans to act similar to drones. For example, let's look at Hitler. He sinned big time, and millions suffered because of it. And that's part of the point, because sin is a wrongful doing against God and others. It makes sense that it would cause suffering. Hitler's particular wrongdoing against God and others not only affected him, but also the lives of everyone during and after his reign. If it wasn't for these people who suffered, the lesson of religious equality might not have been as established as it is now. Thus, there is lessons in suffering no matter how horrible they may be. This is where the problem of evil runs into trouble. Many people wonder, if God is all good, how could he cause such terrible things to happen? Or even maybe, if he is somehow directly involved in causing it, why would he not do something to prevent it? When looking at these questions, it is important to note that God does not cause suffering due to humans' free will. We have the free and open choice to do the right things and the wrong things. This free choice enables people to choose the right thing or the wrong one, and thus is the reason people suffer. On a similar note, then one might ask, why God doesn't just step in and fix all the problems made by these terrible decisions? But you see, that's not how free will works. If that were true, or if God had made humans so that they never made the wrong choices, that wouldn't be free will at all. It is speculated that by giving humans free will, something of comparable moral worth was saved that otherwise would have been lost. Meaning, humanity could have been created like a computer, only doing what the creator, who in this case is God, wants.
For example, in Steve's story, he did not suffer because God wanted to punish him for not listening to the tour guide's directions, but rather Steve suffered because he himself had made the bad decision not to follow the rules. Because of the poor decision that he made, he ended up losing both of his legs, and as a result of that, ended up suffering. Psychological suffering, according to Rees's book Christian Theology, is defined as an unpleasant emotion or state of mind that may be experienced as depression, grief, heartbreak, hatred, guilt, hopelessness, regret, self-pity, and loneliness. This type of suffering relates to Steve's story, for now after the attack is over, he pities himself, feels regret for not listening to the tour guide's instructions, and feels hopeless due to the fact that he has now lost both of his legs. Spiritual suffering, on the other hand, is defined as an internal distress that can cause things such as restlessness, anxiety, shame, guilt, sleeplessness, or other mental distress. For example, because of the long-term effect that this is going to have on Steve's life, he now continuously feels guilty and shameful for not listening to the instructions of the tour guide. He constantly thinks to himself, if I wouldn't have left the trails to take the picture, I might still have my legs. Instructive suffering is the third and final type of suffering that is talked about within Christian theology. It is a little bit different than the others, for this type of suffering involves the lesson that one has learned from the suffering that has taken place. For example, it focuses more on whether or not the person was able to grow because of it. In Steve's situation, one could say that his suffering was in fact instructive due to the fact that he has learned to listen more strictly to the rules. As a result of his suffering, Steve now knows to never make that decision again, for now his legs have been amputated.
The book of Job is an interesting example of human suffering. Job was a man who devoutly followed God. He frequently offered sacrifices for his family just in case they sinned. God himself even stated, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and who shuns evil." Now God was having a conversation with Satan, who began to question Job's devotion. Job is rich. Job has a family. Job is really quite well off in life. Of course he worships you as he should. He has no reason not to. Nothing terrible has ever happened to him. Now if he stayed true to you even without all of your blessings, then he would have faith. God then gave Satan the control over the various aspects of Job's life, but not over Job himself. Understandably, with Satan in control of his assets, Job's life went downhill very fast. Nearly all at once, 4 messengers arrived to tell Job that all of his children had been killed and all of his wealth destroyed. Yet even after hearing this, Job was faithful. The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. Again, God and Satan were talking, and again Job was brought up. But what else can he do? He still has his health. A man who fears for his life will do anything, even spite you. So once again, God gave Satan control over Job, only limiting him to not taking Job's life. And Job was struck with terrible afflictions, to the point that even his wife told him to curse the Lord and die. But Job would not do it. Now Job had 3 friends who came, but over time they all ceased to be helpful, instead telling Job that his issues were due to some great sin. Job at this point wished he had never been born. Yet he did not curse God. Instead he often was questioning, frequently coming back to the phrase, "Why me?" Then enter God. Now God had never told Job of what was happening, nor why he had given Satan control over Job's life. Yet God had a plan, and was forthcoming to Job about that after the fact. Over the entirety of chapter 38, God basically tells Job, "What the heck do you even know? Very little. There are bigger things in motion than you can comprehend. You are a part of it, but you cannot understand it all." This greatly humbled Job, and he repented. God then turned his ire on Job's friends, telling them to make a burnt offering, and that Job must pray for them, as they did not have his faith. Once Job did this, the Lord made him rich again, and gave him new children, and blessed him even more than he had originally. What does this mean, though? That our human understanding is not enough to fully comprehend God's plans. That sometimes we must suffer for some other greater purpose that we cannot understand in the moment. Asking why me is not the question that should be asked. Rather, one should ask, what for? For, that will help them better understand the purpose. As a psychologist and survivor of Auschwitz, Frankl had a unique understanding of suffering and humans' reactions to it. In his book, A Man's Search for Meaning, he discusses how the one thing that cannot be lost is one's attitude, how one reacts when things go wrong. This ties back into the free will defense against the problem of evil. Without free will, humans would be drones. So there is a purpose to the ability to choose, even if it does lead to suffering. The same is true for instructive suffering. Lessons learned are valuable. Just like Frankl in his time in Auschwitz, he learned from it and was able to use it to help others. Like Job, when bad things happen, we could ask, why me? And wish we had never been born. Or we can trust it is for a purpose, and praise God while working to make it worth something.
Prayer has always been thought of a way for us humans to speak directly and confidentially with the Lord. a way we can build a more personal relationship with Him. We can ask Him to fix problems in our lives, grant us fortune, forgive us of sins, or correct mistakes one has made. But we should never rely or expect prayer to magically fix our problems. There is many things prayer can't do. With the exception of rare miracles, prayer cannot be used to try and change the laws of nature. Nor should they be used over something that is within our power to achieve. If prayer was able to cause the end of all suffering in the world, we wouldn't have the ability to develop from these misfortunes. After all, God has a purpose for each and every action that occurs in this world. This may seem overly constrictive, but prayer is still very beneficial to those who are suffering. It gives us company when no one is near and times are rough. It can provide encouragement and can lead us to perseverance. It can strengthen one's sense of justice, put one in touch with others, and inspire others to help. Those people reacting to those in need are a sign of God's goodness in everyday life.